Hey there. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So, when you think about the end of World War II, VE Day, VJ Day, right? That's usually what comes to mind. Big celebrations. But the reality, well, how it actually ended and what happened right after.
Yeah.
It's way more complicated, much bigger, and frankly, pretty brutal sometimes, especially if you look beyond, the Western Front.
Absolutely. It's a sprawling picture.
So today, that's what we're diving into, this incredibly complex aftermath. We've got a whole stack of sources, articles, research notes, even some firsthand eyewitness stuff.
Yeah. Covering everything from the big global power shifts down to, well, the really harsh realities people faced on the ground.
Especially in the Soviet sphere and on the Eastern Front, which often gets less focus.
Right.
Our goal here is basically to cut through some of the simpler narratives, pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, and look at the consequences. Because understanding this period was not just history, is it? It's vital for, making sense of today.
Definitely. We'll be looking at how the superpowers emerged, the Cold War's beginnings, the huge human cost.
And some really challenging stuff around justice and how history gets remembered.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Right. So the moment the fighting stops, the world map basically gets redrawn. The biggest immediate thing our sources stress is the U.S. and the Soviet Union emerging as these two dominant superpowers.
The big two.
Exactly. And crucially, this happens just as the world is grappling with the terrifying new reality of, well, nuclear weapons.
A completely new factor. But it wasn't all about competition straight away, was it? The sources mentioned the UN being set up.
Yes, that's a key outcome, the United Nations. It was created specifically to foster international cooperation, try and prevent future wars.
Kind of replacing the League of Nations, which obviously hadn't worked out.
Precisely. A new attempt at collective security. And globally, there's another huge shift happening, decolonization.
Yeah. The empire's starting to break up.
Right. Our sources show European powers like the UK and France, and also Japan in Asia, starting to withdraw from colonies. This sparks independence movements all across Asia, Africa, Oceania.
Reshaping huge parts of the world map.
But that wartime alliance between the US and USSR, it fractures really quickly.
Leading straight into the Cold War.
Pretty much. And our sources call it cold because, they mostly avoided direct all-out war between the two giants.
Right. It was more espionage, politics, proxy wars.
Exactly. Proxy wars that were devastating for the countries involved. And Europe becomes this central battleground.
Divided down the aisle.
Yeah. Western Europe gets rebuilt with U.S. money, the Marshall Plan. But Central and Eastern Europe fall under Soviet influence, behind what Churchill famously called the Iron Curtain.
So you get the Western Bloc, led by the U.S., and the Eastern Bloc, led by the USSR.
And alliances are shifting all the time. Some countries try to stay non-aligned, navigate between the two.
It's fascinating, though, that even as Europe's dividing, our sources show Western European nations starting to integrate.
Yeah, it's almost counterintuitive. But you get things like the European coal and steel community starting up.
The idea being to tie economies together, especially France and Germany, to stop future wars.
That was the core idea. Prevent conflict through economic cooperation. And that's really the seed, that eventually grows into the EU.
Okay, so while the West is getting aid and starting to integrate what's happening inside the Soviet Union and the areas it now controls, the sources paint a pretty grim picture.
Incredibly grim. The Soviet economy was just shattered. Our sources estimate something like a quarter of their capital resources destroyed. Industrial output, farming, way below pre-war levels in 45.
And their rebuilding strategy was totally different from the Marshall Plan.
Completely. They refused U.S. aid. Instead, they focused on taking machinery, raw materials from occupied Central and Eastern Europe.
And reparations from Germany and its allies.
Huge reparations. And the focus was all on heavy industry steel, manufacturing, agriculture, consumer goods. They often took a back seat.
So people might not have actually seen their lives improve much?
In many ways, no. Steel production doubled by 53 compared to 1940, which is impressive. But our sources suggest that consumer goods, even food in some places, were scarcer than they had been back in the late 1920s.
Wow. And there's another really difficult aspect the sources bring up, how Soviet citizens returning from abroad were treated, ex-POWs, civilians.
Yeah, deep suspicion. The thinking was, if you'd been outside Soviet control, maybe you'd collaborated with the Nazis.
Just by virtue of surviving outside.
Pretty much. Our sources state over 226,000 were investigated by the NKVD, the secret police, and sent straight to forced labor camps, the Gulag.
And others.
Conscripted into the army or forced into labor battalions regardless of what they'd been through.
And the Soviet Union itself is expanding.
Massively. As the Red Army pushed the Germans back, they either annexed countries directly into the USSR, making them Soviet Socialist Republic,
Or set up satellite states.
right, Poland, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Albania, East Germany, all became tightly controlled satellites.
Except Yugoslavia, you mentioned.
Yugoslavia is the interesting exception. Tito's partisans had largely liberated the country themselves, so while it was communist, it stayed independent of Moscow's direct control.
And the Baltic states.
Yeah.
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania.
A really tragic story there. Annexed in 1940, occupied by Germany, then reoccupied and fully reannexed by the Soviets after the war.
Which led to huge resistance, right?
Yeah, mass deportations by the Soviets, and then this long, brutal guerrilla war fought by the Forest Brothers that went on well into the 1950s.
And the West didn't really contest this.
Our sources mention that Churchill and the U.S. essentially decided the Atlantic Charter's self-determination principle didn't apply to the Baltics.
What about Finland?
Finland kept its independence, but having sided with Germany after the Winter War, it faced, let's say, significant constraints from the Soviet Union. They had to tread very carefully.
Okay, so huge shifts, rebuilding, expansion. Amidst all this, Europe is also trying to deal with justice, collaborators, and redraw borders.
Exactly. It's happening all over. In France, you had the Opération Légale, the legal purge.
Trying French citizens for collaborating with the Nazis.
Right. Domestic trials. Our sources say around 300,000 cases looked into, 120,000 sentences, over 6,700 death sentences, but only about 791 actually carried out.
And most got amnesty later.
Yeah, eventually. But importantly, these were French trials for French citizens, no international ones for French collaborators.
Italy saw massive changes too, didn't it? The monarchy was kicked out.
Yeah, there was huge anger at the king for backing Mussolini. It fueled the Republican movement. They had a referendum in 1946.
The first time Italian women voted nationally, the sources say.
That's right, and they voted to abolish the monarchy. Italy became a republic.
And Italy also lost territory.
Significant territory under the 1947 peace treaty, islands to Greece, land to France, and a big chunk of the Adriatic coast, Istria. Other areas went to Yugoslavia.
Which caused a huge population movement.
Yes, the Eastern Dalmatian exodus. Our sources estimate somewhere between 230,000 and 350,000 ethnic Italians and others choosing Italy left the region.
Mostly for Italy, but some further afield.
Americas, Australia, South Africa, and Italy had to pay reparations too. Around $360 million. Trieste was complicated, initially run by the UN, then split between Italy and Yugoslavia.
And its colonies.
Italian Somaliland became a UN trust territory, but still administered by Italy until 1960.
So these border changes weren't just Italy. This was happening across the board, causing massive displacement.
Absolutely massive. The Soviet Union annexed land from Germany, Finland, Poland, even Japan. Poland itself lost huge territory in the east to the Soviets.
But gained German land in the west.
Right, east of the Oder-Neisse line. And then there's the expulsion of Germans.
The really painful chapter. How many are we talking about?
The sources estimate around 12 million ethnic Germans expelled from areas that became Poland, Czechoslovakia, or were now in East Germany. About 7 million from Germany proper, 3 million from the Sudetenland. This was agreed upon at the Potsdam Conference.
Just vast numbers of people uprooted.
Unimaginable disruption. And then within Germany itself, you have the whole question of denazification.
Which the sources suggest wasn't exactly thorough, especially in the West.
They're pretty blunt. They call the efforts in West Germany wanting. Laws were passed by 1951 that effectively ended a lot of it.
Leading to former Nazis getting back into positions of power.
Shockingly quickly, yeah. Our sources give examples: Kiesinger becoming chancellor, Scheel becoming president, both former Nazi party members. Hans Globke, involved in the Nuremberg race laws, became a top aide to Chancellor Adenauer.
It's kind of staggering. But this leads into something even more complex, doesn't it? Recruiting former enemies.
Yes. This is where the emerging Cold War really casts a shadow. It wasn't just about punishing the past, it was about securing assets for the future rivalry.
So denazification gets relaxed.
Deliberately relaxed, according to the sources, especially by the British and Americans. They wanted German scientists.
The rocket scientists, nuclear experts.
Exactly. People from places like Peenemünde. And the sources mention clear orders not to share this captured tech or knowledge with the Soviets. Operations like Fedden Mission, Operation Lusty, it was all about grabbing these assets for the West.
And it wasn't just scientists, was it? Intelligence agencies got involved.
Heavily. There's a New York Times report cited in our sources estimating U.S. agencies hired at least 1,000 former Nazis as spies and informants.
And covered it up.
Actively concealed their backgrounds for decades. The historian Timothy Naftali is quoted saying the CIA's main worry was secrecy about their past crimes, not necessarily the guilt itself.
Wow. And the British were doing similar things.
Yes, recruiting agents for covert ops behind the Iron Curtain. Operation Jungle used Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian recruits, sometimes launched from Germany using old German E-boats.
Trying to gather intel, stir resistance.
And even assassinate Soviet officials trained out of Finland. But our sources mention this network was badly compromised.
Kim Philby, the Soviet double agent.
His betrayal led to many agents being caught and killed. It's a really murky side of the immediate post-war years.
Okay, let's pivot now from that high-level geopolitics and murky compromises to the sheer reality of the Eastern Front itself. The sources describe it as just immense.
The broadest land front in military history is how one source puts it. Millions and millions of soldiers locked in this incredibly brutal fight.
And the human cost. It's hard to even comprehend.
Staggering numbers. Axis military dead, 5.1 million. Soviet military dead, somewhere between 8.7 and 10 million.
And most German losses were on the Eastern Front.
The vast majority. And that's just soldiers. Civilian deaths are estimated between 18 and 24 million. Just horrific. And the nature of the fighting there was different too, wasn't it? The ideology.
Exceptionally vicious. Our sources really highlight how the Nazi leadership saw it. Not just conquest, but a racial war.
A war between Nazism and Jewish Bolshevism. The goal was Lebensraum, living space for the Aryan master race by eliminating or enslaving the Slavic subhumans.
And this filtered down to the troops.
Absolutely. Soldiers were encouraged to see the enemy as less than human, to seek revenge, to terrorize. It fostered unbelievable brutality.
It's interesting the sources mention the Spanish Civil War as a kind of prelude, a testing ground.
Yeah, for both German and Soviet weapons and tactics. A grim foreshadowing.
Despite this ideological furnace, the Soviets did get Allied help, didn't they?
Significant help. The strategic bombing campaign by the US and UK hit German industry hard, tied up resources. Sometimes bombing runs, like Dresden, were even specifically timed to help Soviet advances.
And the Arctic convoys? Lend-Lease.
Hugely important. Training for pilots, too. But Lend-Lease, the scale of it is often underestimated.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Our sources give some striking figures. 58% of the high-octane fuel the Soviets used for their Air Force. Lend-Lease. A third of their trucks. Over 90% of their railway equipment.
90%. Wow.
Plus huge amounts of raw materials, explosives, even entire factories sometimes. Stalin himself apparently admitted in 1944 that 2/3 of Soviet heavy industry was built with U.S. help, the rest with other Western aid.
So it allowed them to focus their own production.
Exactly. Focus on tanks, planes, guns, knowing they could rely on the West for things like fuel, trucks, railways. It shows a real interdependence.
Militarily, after Stalingrad, the Red Army just kept pushing west.
Relentlessly. Kyiv fell in late 1943. By early 1944, they were back at the old Polish-Soviet border.
And the summer of 1944 saw huge offensives. Operation Bagration.
A massive hammer blow in Belarus. Partly successful because the Germans had moved troops to France after D-Day.
But then there's that controversial moment, the Warsaw Uprising. The Red Army stops.
Right. Halts on the other side of the Vistula River while the Polish Home Army fights and is crushed in Warsaw. Why they stopped, whether Stalin couldn't advance or wouldn't, is still heavily debated, as our sources note.
Leadership played a huge role on both sides, didn't it? Hitler's interference.
Often disastrous, according to the sources. His belief in his own genius, overruling generals, insisting on holding ground no matter what, led to catastrophes like Stalingrad, sacking experienced commanders.
Replacing them with yes men.
Pretty much. Stalin's leadership was also complex. The pre-war purges had removed experienced officers, though it promoted younger ones. You had political commissars having dual command.
Which could cause issues. And his caution before the invasion.
Yeah, the sources point to his refusal to believe the intelligence, keeping troops too far forward, not alerting the Air Force, which meant huge losses in the first days of Barbarossa.
There's a really chilling point the sources make linking Hitler's first big defeat near Moscow to his decision to greenlight the Holocaust and ramp up anti-Slavic propaganda.
A very dark potential connection highlighted there.
And we should also remember, as the sources point out, that some Soviet citizens actually fought with the Germans.
Yes. Often POWs who were given little choice, forming units like the Russian Liberation Army or various legions from occupied territories. And some Waffen SS units were recruited in the Baltics and Ukraine.
So the sheer death toll. It comes down to brutality, ideology, lack of supplies.
All of it. Mistreatment of POWs, especially by the Germans.
Yep.
German atrocities against civilians, scorched earth tactics by both sides, and the Germans' reliance on millions of slave laborers. It was just total war in its most brutal form.
Okay, let's zoom in on the very end now, the Battle for Berlin, April, May 1945. What do the eyewitness accounts tell us?
They paint an incredible picture of chaos and intensity. The scale was enormous. The Soviets threw 3 whole army groups fronts at the city.
How many troops?
Over 2.5 million Soviet troops, 6,000 tanks, tens of thousands of artillery pieces against maybe 800,000 Germans, many of them poorly equipped Volkssturm militia.
And the accounts from soldiers crossing the Oder River into Germany itself.
Yeah, crossing the frozen river, setting up bridgeheads, first hand-to-hand fights. Spirits were high. They knew the end was near.
Entering Germany as the lair of fascism, as one source puts it. Leaflets urging revenge.
Definitely a sense of vengeance in the air. They describe seeing utter panic among German civilians fleeing, roads jammed with abandoned belongings, looting.
Soldiers sending stuff home.
Widespread, apparently. One really striking detail is soldiers being amazed by the standard of living in German homes compared to the USSR.
Books, porcelain, clocks, things they hadn't seen.
And political officers trying to explain it away as plunder from Europe. One soldier quoted saying he'd burn more houses in revenge for his collective farm members. A real mix of emotions.
Excitement, too. Crossing bridges under fire, getting newspapers announcing the advance, feeling almost drunk with victory so close.
But the fighting in Berlin itself, just brutal urban combat.
Chaos, fire, smoke.
Shooting from everywhere, windows, doors. They described the German defenders looking starved and worn out. Berlin wasn't seen as beautiful, just narrow, dangerous streets.
And getting across canals was tough. Bridges blown.
Required risky tactics, diversionary attacks so engineers could get across somewhere else.
Cellars were dangerous places.
Very. Germans hiding, leading to sudden, deadly close-up fights. One account mentions officers killed instantly entering a cellar they thought was clear.
And the Reichstag becomes the big symbol.
The ultimate prize. Raising the victory banner there on April 30th. Even though the building itself hadn't been used as a parliament for years, it was the symbol.
Immortalized in that famous photo, which, as the sources know, was often staged later.
Yeah, restaged for better composition. But the symbolism was immense. It's really powerful how those personal accounts capture both the big picture, the final push, the revenge, and the sheer grinding horror of street-to-street fighting.
So we have the victory, the fall of Berlin. But pulling back, the sources also describe a much darker side to the Red Army's advance and occupation. And again, we need to be clear here. We're reporting what's in our source material regarding these very difficult events impartially, without endorsing any specific viewpoint.
Right. It's crucial context, however difficult. Our sources mesh in accounts of widespread rape and robbery by Soviet troops as they move through the Balkans, Romania, Hungary, Yugoslavia, though Bulgaria was apparently spared the worst.
But Germany was different.
Significantly worse, according to these accounts. Widespread rape and murder of German civilians. Some sources state it was as bad or worse than Nazi propaganda had warned. Political officers sometimes encouraged it as revenge.
Are there estimates? It's hard to quantify, surely.
Very hard, but the sources do cite some attempts. One estimate suggests maybe 1.9 million German women raped in total across Germany by Red Army soldiers.
And in Berlin specifically.
Estimates there suggest maybe a third of women were raped, many multiple times. Hospital records cited suggest 95,000 to 130,000 rapes in Berlin, with maybe 10,000 deaths resulting, often suicide.
Did Soviet command try to stop it?
The sources say there were attempts later, by 1947, to curb it, often by keeping troops isolated. But it's also stressed that not all soldiers took part. It wasn't universal, but it was widespread.
And the sources indicate this wasn't just Germany or just 1945. They list other instances attributed to Soviet forces over time.
Yes, they broaden the scope, mentioning things like the Amur River massacre in the early 20th century.
Events in Lithuania during and after the war.
Executions, mass deportations in 1940, 41, and after WWII. Huge numbers deported or imprisoned, thousands dying in camps or prisons, right up to the violence in Vilnius in 1991.
In Poland, too. Persecution of the Home Army.
Deportations to the Gulag, campaigns against partisans after the war, like the Augusto Roundup where hundreds disappeared, accusing Polish resistance fighters of being fascist to justify sentences. Thousands executed or died in prison.
The sources also mention Manchuria after Japan's surrender.
Yes, accounts of Soviet and Mongolian troops attacking and raping Japanese civilians, sometimes with local encouragement. Looting, too. The Gijinmyo massacre is specifically mentioned.
And even much later, the Soviet-Afghan War.
Some scholars cited call it genocide, up to 2 million Afghans killed. Sources mention specific massacres of civilians, abduction and rape of women.
And finally, Baku in 1990.
The Black January crackdown. So the sources present a long and troubling pattern.
There's that anecdote about Gilas complaining to Marshal Konev about Red Army behavior in Yugoslavia.
And Konev basically brushing it off, blaming deserters. The sources suggest this failure to address the issue was one reason Yugoslavia pulled away from Moscow.
The legacy is still sensitive. That Polish statue incident in Gdańsk in 2013.
The statue depicting a rape near a Soviet memorial, removed quickly, but it sparked a huge row. Shows how raw these memories still are.
Okay. A very difficult section, and again, we're relaying the content from our sources here. Let's shift now to how this victory, especially Berlin, was remembered, particularly in the Soviet Union and Russia.
Right. This is crucial. Our sources explain the Great Patriotic War, WWII, became the absolute main foundation myth of the Soviet Union.
More important than the revolution, even.
In many ways, yes. It became the justification for everything. The suffering, the purges, the terror before the war. The narrative was, this hardship made us strong enough to win. Earlier revolutionary enthusiasm had faded by the 30s, so the war provided this powerful, unifying story.
And Victory Day, May 9th, becomes central.
Established as a major holiday in 1965, a key part of the official commemoration.
Memorials started going up in Berlin very quickly, didn't they? While the city was still rubble.
Remarkably fast, the Tiergarten Monument right near the Reichstag. A huge bronze Soviet soldier, pure symbol of victory.
And the sources mentioned a design with a woman was rejected.
Yeah, apparently didn't fit the desired message of military triumph over fascism rather than reconciliation with the German people.
Then there's Treptow Park.
A massive memorial complex. The iconic soldier liberator statue there became a central symbol of this whole war cult. The sculptor, Vucetich, also did the swords into plowshare statue at the UN.
And another big cemetery, Schönholzer Heide.
Yes, over 13,000 buried there, mostly in mass brother graves. Sources describe it as more solemn, focused on the sheer cost, the sacrifice.
There was also a museum in Karlshorst, in a former KGB building.
Yeah, the Museum of Unconditional Surrender. Designed mainly for Soviet soldiers, meant to be a formative experience, instill gratitude for the war generation.
The sources link this to theories about collective memory needing external signs as direct experience fades.
Exactly. Halbwach's theory. When fewer people remember firsthand, you need monuments, rituals, museums to keep the memory alive and shape it.
So what happens after the Soviet Union collapses in 91? Does the memory fade?
Quite the opposite, according to our sources. Citing historian Peter John, they say the memory of the Great Patriotic War actually became even more important to Russian society after 1991.
And under Putin, there's been a real revival.
A major revival of the Great Patriotic War cult, as the sources put it. Victory Day celebrations are huge. One poll mentioned shows 76% of Russians celebrating it.
Why the revival?
Sources suggest that as the actual veterans pass away, the state feels a need to preserve this glorious and heroic picture. It becomes state-managed collective memory.
Like the Immortal Regiment marches.
That's a prime example.
Yeah.
People marching with photos of relatives who fought. It started locally, but now it's heavily promoted by the state, a new state ritual. Putin marches in it.
Turning personal memory into a national event.
Precisely. And new monuments reinforce it, too. Victory Park in Moscow with that huge obelisk shaped like a bayonet.
Taller than other statues, deliberately.
Yes. Inside the museum there, dioramas, sound effects recreate battles. Statues explicitly link WWII to present-day Russia. Other installations link Soviet soldiers with the Tsarist army, creating this long historical narrative of national struggle.
And some more controversial stuff like that Berlin battle reenactment.
Yeah, the 2017 event at Park Patriot near Moscow, storming a model Reichstag. The official line was it showed the horror of war, but the comments about teaching patriotism and it's our territory, we do what we want, suggest a strong nationalist message.
So the sources see this as nationalist politics, but also fulfilling a need.
Yes, a tool for the state, but also tapping into a genuine desire among many Russians to honor their ancestors as heroes, providing a kind of national anchor after the Soviet collapse.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We've covered a huge amount: global shifts, the Soviet reality, justice, borders, the brutal Eastern Front, Berlin, war crimes, memory. Why does digging into all this complexity matter for you, the listener, today?
Because it fundamentally shaped the world we're in. The whole geopolitical setup, the legacy of the Cold War, it starts right here.
The human cost to displacement, trauma, it doesn't just disappear.
Not at all. And it highlights how history isn't fixed. It's constantly being interpreted, used, shaped by collective memory, often influenced by states for present-day reasons.
Understanding that process is crucial for navigating today's world, isn't it? Seeing how narratives are constructed.
Absolutely. And there are even direct physical legacies still around.
Like unexploded bombs still being found.
Yeah, requiring evacuations like in Hanover recently, or chemical weapons dumped at sea. The war isn't entirely over, physically.
So looking beyond those simple VE Day narratives gives you a much richer, maybe more uncomfortable, but definitely more accurate view of how we got here.
Exactly. A more vital perspective on the forces still shaping our world.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've explored the aftermath, the Eastern Front, the way the war is remembered, all based on our source material. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a lot to unpack.
And thinking about how these echoes persist, how memory is still contested. It reminds me of a quote: "Our source is a tribute to the old Russian general, Suvorov.
Oh, which one?
The war is over, only when the last soldier is buried."
That's powerful.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the ongoing human cost, the physical traces left behind, and maybe how parts of this war, especially in memory and identity, are still being fought over today. Something to reflect on.